Welcome. You ever listen to someone make a point and just get that feeling, that little voice in your head that says, wait a minute, something about that just isn't right? Well, today, we're going to turn you into an argument detective. We are opening the case files on what are called logical fallacies. These are the common, sneaky flaws in reasoning that people use, sometimes without even realizing it. By the end of this, you'll have all the tools you need to spot them. All right, let's dive right in with our first piece of evidence. Now, this sentence, it seems pretty straightforward, right? A tour guide is pointing something out, but there's a hidden flaw in how it's built, a classic case of misdirection. And there it is. That's the problem. The grammar is so fuzzy that we're left scratching our heads. Is a person standing in the square, looking at the building? Or is the building itself actually standing in the square? This confusion, well, that's our first clue that a logical fallacy is at play. And that leads us perfectly to our first category of flawed arguments, tricks of ambiguity. These fallacies all pop up when a conclusion is drawn from a word, a phrase, or even a sentence structure that can mean more than one thing. It's all just a game of words.
Okay, check out this case. The conclusion is just, well, it's ridiculous. A triangle can't be ignorant. But when you look at the first two statements, the premises, they seem to lead right there. So where exactly does the logic completely fall apart? The clue is hidden in a single word.
And that brings us to the name for this particular logical crime, equivocation. This is a classic bait and switch. An argument uses a word one way at the beginning and then ever so sneakily swaps its meaning by the end to trick you. And here you can see the deception laid bare. The argument kicks off using obtuse in its proper geometric sense, for a triangle. But then it pivots to that second meaning, dull or stupid, to land on that crazy conclusion. The whole argument is built on that slippery change in definition. Okay, let's move on to our next case. We're going to shift gears a little bit from the meaning of single words to the actual structure of an entire sentence. These are fallacies caused by what's called syntactical ambiguity, which is really just a fancy way of saying bad grammar. So take a look at this statement. Who made the mistake here? Was it Habtom admitting he messed up? Or was Habtom pointing the finger at Megaressa? The way the sentence is built makes it impossible to know for sure. That little pronoun he is our culprit. The official name for this fallacy is amphiboly. It happens when someone takes a grammatically messy statement, just picks one of the possible interpretations, and then runs with it to a conclusion that might be totally wrong. Our very first puzzle, the one about the building in the square, that was a textbook example of amphiboly. Right here, you can see the two completely different scenarios that are created by that one ambiguous pronoun. So if someone builds an argument based on just one of these without getting any clarification, they're committing the fallacy of amphiboly. They're basically building their case on grammatical quicksand. All right, our next set of fallacies involves a whole different kind of flawed thinking. These happen when we get tangled up in the relationship between the individual parts of something and the group or the whole that they make up. Let's start with two simple and very true facts. Sodium by itself, yeah, it's a deadly poison. And chlorine gas, also a deadly poison. I don't think anyone would argue with those 2 points, but what happens when we put them together? We end up with this conclusion. And, of course, we all know from personal experience that this is completely false. You probably put salt on your food every single day. So what went wrong here? The argument just assumed that the properties of the parts automatically carry over to the whole. This is the fallacy of composition. It's the mistake of thinking that if all the ingredients are a certain way, then the final dish must be that way too. But as we just saw with salt, combining parts can create something with totally new and different properties. Now let's flip that logic on its head. Here, we start with a fact about a whole organization. The Royal Society is really, really old. Then we look at just one of its parts, a single member, and we end up with another conclusion that's just completely absurd. And this is the fallacy of division, the exact opposite of composition. It's the mistake of assuming that what's true for the whole group must also be true for every single individual member inside it. I mean, think about it. Just because a sports team is amazing doesn't mean every single player on it is a superstar. Okay, detective, it's time to sharpen those skills. Now that you've got the basics down, let's look at some finer details and a few complex cases you might run into out there in the wild. Now, this is a tricky one. People often get the fallacy of composition mixed up with another one called hasty generalization. This little chart really clarifies the difference. The key is to look at the conclusion. Is it a statement about the group as a single thing, as a collective? If so, that's composition. Or is it a statement about each and every member of that group individually? That's a hasty generalization. Okay, now for a final challenge. Read this sentence very carefully. It looks like a simple instruction from a cookbook, right? But it's actually a masterclass in confusion because it's hiding not one, but two fallacies. And here you can see how fallacies can actually team up. First, you've got the ambiguous grammar. Who exactly is stewed, the oysters or us, the diners? That's our old friend amphibole. And second, the word stewed has two meanings, cooked or, intoxicated. That's equivocation. It's a real double whammy of flawed logic. So there you have it, 4 really powerful tools for your argument detective toolkit. You're looking for words that change their meaning, grammar that's just plain confusing, and bad assumptions about parts and wholes. These 4 fallacies of ambiguity are absolutely everywhere once you know what to look for. So the real question is, now that you know the tricks of the trade, you can't really unsee them, can you? Whether you're watching the news, scrolling social media, or just listening to an ad on the radio, these flawed arguments are being used all the time. But the next time you hear one, you'll be ready. Case closed.